The blinding sun rises over the Valley of Jezreel. September 3rd, 1260, and 20,000 men are about to decide the fate of civilization itself. Because if the warriors gathering in this valley fail, if they break under the coming storm, nothing will stop the horsemen from the east from riding all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. Mecca will burn, Medina will fall, and the Mongol Empire will become eternal. But history doesn't know what's about to happen yet. Welcome to Untold Ancient Wars. I'm your host, and this is the story of Ain Jalut, the battle where the unstoppable was stopped. For 40 years, the Mongol war machine had devoured the world. City after city, kingdom after kingdom, empire after empire, all crushed beneath the hooves of the steppe's finest horsemen. In 1258, Baghdad fell, the jewel of Islamic civilization torn apart. Its libraries burned, its people slaughtered. The Abbasid Caliphate, which had stood for 5 centuries, erased in a week. The Mongols weren't just winning battles, they were erasing cultures. And they were coming west. The question everyone from Cairo to Jerusalem was asking wasn't if the Mongols would conquer them, but when. Except there was one group that refused to accept the inevitable: the Mamluks. These weren't born princes or hereditary nobles. They were slave soldiers, taken as boys, trained in the most brutal military system ever devised, and forged into the deadliest cavalry on earth. They'd recently seized power in Egypt, and they understood something the princes and caliphs didn't. You don't negotiate with the Mongols. You don't buy them off. You don't bend the knee and hope for mercy. You fight, or you die. Leading them was Sultan Qutuz, a man who'd lost everything to the Mongols as a child, watched his family destroyed, been sold into slavery, and clawed his way to the throne of Egypt through pure will and the edge of a sword. When the Mongol general Hulagu sent him the standard ultimatum, surrender or be annihilated, Qutuz did something no one did. He executed the ambassadors, cut their heads off in public, and sent them back. That was his answer, and beside Qutuz stood Baibars, the wolf, possibly the greatest military tactician the Islamic world ever produced. Brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely fearless. These two men, former slave soldiers, were about to attempt the impossible. The Mongol force moving toward them was commanded by Kitbuqa, a Nestorian Christian, a legend among Mongol generals, a man who'd helped destroy Baghdad and knew nothing but victory. His army of 20,000 included not just Mongols, but Georgian cavalry, Armenian heavy cavalry, and Syrian auxiliaries. Christian and Mongol forces united, blessed by their churches, convinced God rode with them. They'd never lost, they'd never even been bloodied. Until September 3rd, 1260, the place was called Ain Jalut, Goliath's spring, where, according to legend, David had faced his giant. Mount Gilboa rose to the south, the hills of Galilee to the north, and between them, a valley that was about to run red. Qutuz had roughly 20,000 men, outnumbered in nothing but experience. Every Mamluk warrior wore lamella armor, small plates laced together, mail hauberks beneath, their war horses draped in scale armor. Pointed conical helmets with mail coifs protected their heads, composite recurve bows, the same weapon the Mongols used, hung at their sides, curved swords at their hips, lances in their hands. They were built for this, but Baibars knew, you don't beat Mongols by fighting them straight up. So the night before, while Kitbuqa camped, confident, expecting another terrified enemy, Baibars was moving. The bulk of the Mamluk army, 15,000 men, disappeared into the hills, into the tree lines, hidden, and Qutuz positioned his forces so that when morning came, the Mongols would be staring directly into the rising sun. First blood to the Mamluks. As dawn broke, Kitbuqa saw what he expected: a small Mamluk force, maybe 5,000, standing in the valley. He smiled. Another easy victory. But that small force was led by Baibars himself, and he proceeded to do something brilliant, something insane. He attacked, hit and run, archery volleys, cavalry charges that broke off at the last, provoking. For hours, The Mongols, disciplined, held formation, but Kitbuqa was watching his enemy use Mongol tactics, the feigned retreat, the harassment, and his blood was rising. These weren't frightened Arabs or soft Persians. These were warriors who fought like steppes cavalry. And finally, Kitbuqa made the decision that would cost him everything. He charged 20,000 Mongol, Georgian, Armenian, and Syrian horsemen, the finest cavalry in the world. Composite bows singing thundered after Baibars and his small force. Baibars turned and ran. The Mongols pursued, deeper, deeper into the valley. And then, from every side, from the hills, from the tree lines, 15,000 Mamluk heavy cavalry exploded into the open. The Mongols, the masters of the ambush, had been ambushed. Kitbuqa realized instantly what had happened, and that there was no escape. Only one option remained. Fight. Baibars, in the center of the swirling chaos, did something that became legendary. He ripped off his helmet, so every Mamluk soldier could see him, raised his sword, and screamed at the top of his lungs, "O Islam! O Islam! O Islam!" And 20,000 Mamluks answered with a roar that shook the valley. What followed was some of the most brutal cavalry combat in medieval history. The Mamluk left flank began to collapse under the weight of Georgian and Armenian heavy cavalry. Knights in full armor, devastating. Qutuz saw it, and the Sultan of Egypt, the man who could have commanded from safety, charged personally into the breach, fighting alongside his men, rallying them, holding the line through sheer force of will. In the center, it was horror. Christian heavy cavalry versus Mamluk heavy cavalry, hand to hand, sword against sword, mace against helmet, horses screaming, men dying. This wasn't archery, this wasn't maneuver, this was murder. Lances shattered, curved swords bit through mail, helmets caved in under mace blows. And it went on, neither side breaking. But the Mongols were surrounded, fighting on all sides, and slowly, man by man, they began to fall. Kitbuqa, the great general, was surrounded. The Mamluks offered him mercy, surrender and live. And Kitbuqa, true to the warrior code that had conquered half the earth, refused. He died fighting, sword in hand, taking Mamluk warriors with him to the end. With their commander dead, the Mongols broke. The survivors fled toward Baisan, and the Mamluks pursued, cutting them down. At Baisan, they tried to make a stand, and were crushed again. The undefeated Mongol army had been destroyed. The valley of Ain Jalut was carpeted with the dead, Mongol, Mamluk, Christian, Muslim, thousands of warriors who'd fought with everything they had. But when the sun set on September 3rd, 1260, it was Mamluk banners flying over the field. The impossible had happened, the Mongols had lost, and the loss wasn't temporary. The Mongol Empire's westward expansion ended, permanently. Hulagu, hearing of the disaster, pulled back. The Mamluks went on the offensive, reclaiming Syria, securing the holy cities. Mecca survived, Medina survived, Jerusalem remained in Muslim hands. Western Europe, which had been collectively holding its breath, was saved without even knowing it, because if the Mamluks had lost, there was nothing between the Mongols and Vienna. Ain Jalut wasn't just a battle, it was the hinge of history, and it was won by men who'd started life as slaves. Today, the valley is quiet, peaceful. You'd never know what happened there. But on September 3rd, 1260, in the shadow of Mount Gilboa, where David once fought Goliath, 20,000 Mamluks faced their giant, and they won. Because sometimes the unstoppable meets the unmovable. And history changes. If you want more untold stories from history's greatest battles, subscribe and hit that notification bell. And tell me in the comments, what battle should we cover next? Until then, remember, the outcome is never inevitable until someone makes it so. I'll see you in the next one.